Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Wavelength.
You know, Adelaide has worked really hard over the last few years to build a small bar reputation. I was a kid, the big night in Adelaide was kind of, staying at home and watching the bill.
Sparking the combos about Adelaide.
As a female Sparky, I did get lots of comments on my gender.
You should be having.
And here to make a difference. Yeah, make the difference. Give the youth a voice.
On Fresh 92.7.
Good evening. Welcome to Fresh 92.7. Zane and David with you on Wavelength, sparking the convos about Adelaide you should be having.
Hello, Zane. It's good to be back. Did you know we only have 2 shows left for the year?
Yeah, after this one, 2 more shows, and then we're out, and then it's 2020, and that is terrifying to me.
Absolutely crazy. Next week is December. What is going on?
Maybe we should do a story in these last couple of shows about the terrifying passage of time and how it's going faster than any of us can keep up with. Because I feel like this is an anxiety that a lot of people actually have. I've spoken to a lot of people about this, or maybe they're just validating my freakouts, and actually it's just me.
I don't think it's just you, but I think it's also extremely existential. And I don't know if we're ready to throw this at our fresh listeners. But today, let's get into what everyone's talking about first. How a massive illegal dump has been discovered in the Murray Riverlands. The Environmental Protection Agency says the dump contains thousands of tons of construction and demolition waste, and is just one of many that have been recently discovered outside of Adelaide. SA Greens Senator Sarah Hanson-Young has won her defamation case against former Senator David Lynhelm. She has won $120,000 in damages after Lynhelm made a number of comments about Hanson-Young in the media, following a heated clash in Parliament, during which Lynhelm told Hanson-Young to stop shagging men. And the first lineup announcement for RCC 2020 has been released, with acts like Stereolab, Cut Copy, Amanda Palmer, Sampa the Great, and Baker Boy taking to the University of Adelaide campus for the annual Arts and Music Festival.
That's an awesome lineup.
I know, and that's just the teaser. That's all that's been released so far. You know how big those programs get for RCC, so I'm super keen to see what's going to come next.
Tonight, we've earned the dubious title of Meth Capital of the World. So, how do we solve Adelaide's meth problem? We speak to medical professionals and a former addict who bravely shared his story. We hit the streets to ask where you stand on OK Boomer, and next we introduce you to the 2019 SA Young Achiever of the Year and how he's innovating the way you connect with your loved ones in aged care.
Wavelength.
If you've ever had a loved one in aged care, you might have become frustrated at how you communicate with that loved one and the people caring for them. Sean Grealy, a young man from Adelaide, certainly was, and his genius idea to solve the problem saw him named SA's Young Achiever of 2019.
Wavelength.
It's really hard to understand if you're on the right trajectory. So when you win something like SA Young Achiever of the Year, personally the best part about it was like, cool, I've been recognised, we're actually doing things that are great and we're making a difference.
Adelaide's Sean Grealy beat out a very competitive field of candidates earlier this year to be named SA's Young Achiever of the Year at the 7 News Young Achiever Awards. He won the award for his startup business Care Connect, which is already making waves in the aged care industry both here and around the world.
Care Connect it's a mobile app, and it allows people with family or friends who are in care services, so aged care or disability services, to get updates about their loved ones day to day. So it was built around my grandfather and feeling disconnected from him while he was living at home alone. I was really frustrated with the way we were communicating with the care staff who were helping my grandfather, and I started looking for another way that they could communicate with us. Found email wasn't good, phone call was round robin situation, and text was really frustrating because they never had the same device. So I decided to start just designing a basic app to see if we could, make something happen. We launched with my family in late 2017, which was really cool. So we got updates about my grandfather's meals, him having a glass of red every night, his outings, these really nice moments that you would normally miss. In 2018, we ran 4 pilots, 2 here in South Australia and 2 in New South Wales. Now we have 5 customers nationally, and we just launched in New Zealand 2 weeks ago, which is really exciting. And we're looking to go into America next year, which is really amazing.
Sean's degree was instrumental in helping him put Care Connect together, and he was able to harness the support of the Adelaide community as well.
I'm actually studying a Bachelor of Entrepreneurship at Adelaide University, and I was in another startup at the time, a food tech startup. So I'd actually done that whole process of identify a problem, come up with an idea, and then go into a solution before. If you're doing a startup or even a small business, whatever it is, you should always have people who have either done it before specifically in your space, like almost exactly what you're doing, or people who can help you out with components of what you're trying to achieve. That's one of the main benefits of actually being in Adelaide is we've got that small separation. I'll know someone who you know and you'll know someone I know, and that helps you get things done really quickly. Whereas, if you're in the East Coast, it can be harder to do that and people aren't as friendly and they're not 20 minutes away. So that's one benefit of starting the company here as well.
All of the hard work over the last few years culminated in his big award win, which has brought even more opportunities with it.
So that was amazing to start with. The other people nominated were doing fantastic things. I wasn't super confident that I was going to win. So it was actually quite funny because I hadn't prepared a final speech. And then when I won the category of innovation, I was like, oh, I could win this whole thing. And then I wrote a speech at my table, which came off pretty good, which is fantastic. And
couldn't tell.
Yeah. I didn't actually understand the impact it could have. So firstly, you're in a room with 500 people, maybe more. Most of them are people who are successful or on their way or involved with something important, which is cool. The amount of emails I got and LinkedIn and through our Facebook page was huge. And just people coming up to me after with their business card and saying, hey, we'd love to fly you over to this or have you talk at this event, like paid gigs as well, was amazing. And also just standing with the minister and being on first name with him, that was fantastic as well.
Despite some incredible achievements so far, Sean says there's still a long way to go with Care Connect. I asked him if he was satisfied with where it was at.
Oh, never satisfied, I guess. I'm stoked with what we've achieved to date and where we've got up to. So we had 2 new team members join this year. Really stoked with what we've achieved to date. A lot more to do, obviously, but yeah, happy with where we're up to.
What's next?
So we're doing this release around the new component of our product. I think the whole industry that we're in, so the aging space and disability space, is changing a lot, and we're kind of on the forefront of that. And then we're going global. So getting into America, been talking to some companies in Singapore as well, and just learning. There's so much to learn. I think that's what every day in a company, in a startup, you're always like, wow, I don't know a lot. And then, of course, nominating a few people for SA Young Achiever of the Year. That is next year. Hopefully some of my friends who are doing amazing things in the startup ecosystem as leaders, as well as running their own companies, can get recognised for the amazing work they're doing. And some of my uni friends as well for their research and great work in the STEM space. So really excited about promoting them too.
Wavelength.
Sean Grealy, the SA Young Achiever of the Year for 2019, and nominations for 2020's awards are now open.
There's just so many great young people in Adelaide doing amazing things, hey?
So many, and that field was stacked. So there's like so many different categories, from arts to fashion to, STEM to innovation, which is the kind of category award that Sean won.
Yeah.
And then from there you pick like a, overall winner.
Yeah.
And the stuff that Sean has done, it's pretty incredible and pretty ingenious as well. I think the aged care sector is something I don't think a lot of young people really think about in that way.
Sure.
And for him to have identified this clear issue with the way that he was communicating with his grandfather and with the care staff that just wasn't cutting it. Mm-hmm. And then he actually just sat down and came up with a platform that would fix all of those issues.
Yeah, it's so amazing. I mean, earlier in the year we profiled Sam's Popcorn, another one of the Young Achievers.
Yes.
He was an amazing kid, wasn't he?
He's so cool.
Yeah. But you got to be in it to win it. And so the nominations for the 2020 SA Young Achiever of the Year awards are open at the moment.
If you know anyone or you yourself rate yourself quite highly, any age between 29 and 11, I think, is how old Sam from Sam's Popcorn was.
Yeah.
Any young person who is making waves in our community and doing something really cool is eligible to be nominated.
Wavelength.
We've got him back now. I'm not going to make you cover and do it live again.
Last week I had to... You messaged me at 4 p.m. saying, David, Andrew can't write the politics thing.
Because I totally forgot he was camping. And I was like, can you just do something?
But thankfully, the political expert, the Wavelength political savant, Andrew, is back to tell us what the hell is going on in politics at the moment.
What the hell is going on in politics at the moment? Wavelength on Fresh 92.7.
With the bushfire crisis in Australia continuing on for another week, Prime Minister Scott Morrison says there isn't really a link between our greenhouse gas emissions and the severity of fires around the country. ScoMo reckons that cutting our emissions wouldn't change the season's fire outcome, according to, quote, credible scientific evidence. Staying on the issue, former PM Malcolm Turnbull has crawled out of the woodwork once again to criticise his former party over climate change. Mr Turnbull says the Liberals are struggling with climate denialism, and that is leading renewable energy companies to steer clear of Australia. This climate debate doesn't really show any signs of ending soon. Meanwhile, 2 legal challenges against the government's robo-debt scheme will go ahead, despite the government this week changing the system. Income averaging will no longer be the only method to determine alleged debts. However, around 4,000 plaintiffs will still be suing over what Labor calls, quote, almost certainly illegal debt claims. And to cap everything off, controversial SA politician Cory Bernardi is at last retiring from politics. The senator has been in Parliament for 13 years and is known for his polarising opinions on topics like same-sex marriage, Islam and climate change. Bernardi says the time is right to leave and that he's always remained true to his values. And that's what the hell's going on in politics this week.
So much happening in politics this week. Thank you, Andrew.
I know, I wouldn't have known those things. But au revoir, Bernardi. Will he be missed?
We tried to get him on the show once, actually, and I'm legitimately
more than once.
Yeah, I'm legitimately sad that never happened because that would have been super interesting to contrast his take on certain issues with others.
I agree.
Also, the news about the robo-debt and a kind of real challenge mounting to this.
Yeah, there's that class action building, isn't there, as well? And it's about time. It seems I've had plenty of friends that have had robo-debt called in.
Well, we did a whole story on this recently, and you can find it in the podcast about, people who are on welfare and being hassled by this whole robo-debt fiasco, which, you can agree with chasing up debts that are owed, but they're not calculated right.
No.
In a lot of cases, they're chased in a really, really rough way.
It's very aggressive, and for people who are struggling as it is, having like an extra pressure placed on top of you just can snap
the biggest issue with it kind of comes down to the fact that we're telling people who receive welfare, you owe us this much money. We're not going to explain why. We're not going to break it down. And if you disagree, it's on you to prove that we're wrong. Yeah. Which isn't the way that anything should work. No. And I think all of us can agree, we have the right to challenge things that we're charged. If we, think that we've gotten a bill that's too much, you're damn right we're going to our power company and asking some questions.
Yeah, same with speeding cameras, red light cameras. You can follow those things up and you can challenge them, but this robo-debt thing seems to be just very brick wall-y and it's odd.
Last note I think we should touch on regarding politics because it did break quite late today and you covered it in the intro, but Sarah Hanson-Young winning the defamation case against David Leyenhelm.
She did. Can you believe it? Oh, I can actually. But so she's won $120,000 in damages, which is quite a big defamation case actually. And it all started when he told her in Parliament to stop shagging men or something and was based on that her being a man hater or something, and he just kept going through the media kept dragging it along, but she seems to have triumphed in the end.
It really has nothing to do with anything.
No.
Wavelength.
So South Australia has won a number of pretty honourable titles in recent years. I'd say we're one of Australia and the world's most livable cities. We're a UNESCO World City of Music, which is pretty awesome. But a little while ago, we were given a title we'd probably rather not have, I'd say, because according to new research, South Australia is the meth capital of not just Australia, but the entire world.
So there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah.
It's an extremely dangerous drug, yet so many South Australians are using it. And even off air before, we were just having the chat. It's everywhere. It's amongst people who are maybe poor and living hard lives. It's amongst people who are very wealthy and high functioning and holding their life together, and you can't even really tell. So how has meth usage become so widespread amongst South Australians, and how do we solve Adelaide's problem with it? We sat down with an addict who's since gotten clean, who really bravely shared his experiences with us.
Wavelength.
You would never think small-town Adelaide would become the world's capital of a $100 billion industry like methamphetamine. But statistics show otherwise. Based on a worldwide study conducted in 30 countries, Adelaide was the top-ranking city. The drug is so accessible that some users say getting your hands on a one-night hit is actually cheaper than going out with mates for a pint of beer. We spoke to a former Adelaide meth addict who told us why the state is so vulnerable to the drug.
At the start, and it was just a weekend thing. It was just, you'd go out and you'd have a few beers and you'd end up going to the pub or whatever, and a couple of these mates brought a bit of meth, a bit of gear, whatever you want to call it. They brought that along and you'd have that over a Saturday, and it was just, every weekend. And then, sometimes, there wouldn't be anything on, so we'd end up just going to someone's house and drinking beers. And that's when it sort of becomes a problem, because you're not going out and socialising anymore. You're drinking beers at someone's house and that's around.
But what were the circumstances around you wanting to take the drug?
100% it comes down to mental health as well. Like, you know, out of that group that I was speaking about, there's like probably 10 to 15 of us, but there was only 3 or 4 of us that were constantly doing this. In the 70s, this guy named Bruce Alexander, he'd done a experiment called Rat Park, and what it was, he put a rat in a small enclosure. So he had water there and he had cocaine water. Almost every single time, the rat in the small enclosure would always drink the cocaine water. On the other side of the experiment, he had a big enclosure, which was about 20 rats, 10 female, 10 male, but he had different coloured balls in there, he had lots of cheese, he had everything that the rats wanted. And what he found was that, like, the rats in the bigger enclosure, like, they might have the cocaine water here and there, but none of them ever drank it to the point where they died. Mm-hmm. And most 90% of the rats would never have the cocaine water. It comes down to mental health. If you're basically isolated, then that sort of drug is going to be way more addictive to you than it is someone that's happy and content in life.
How exactly did you access the drugs? Was it easy for you? Was it cheap?
It's so easy. It's so easy. Like, as far as I'm not in that scene anymore, but it's that easy that I could probably make a phone call right now and have something delivered here within half an hour. It's so bad in Adelaide. Like, I'd go as far as saying that everyone has one mate that can probably get it there, and it is really cheap. Like, if you know the right people, it can be really cheap. I was paying, like, I don't know, just under $3,000 an ounce, which is a point for like between $7 and $8.
How did this drug affected you in your life, like in terms of relationships, work, family?
I think you can only hold it together for so long. I was selling a fair bit of meth, plus I was working, plus I was smoking meth every day. So, and I held that together for about 1.5 years. And I guess, like, the tipping point is when you lose your job. And I lost my job due to my drug addiction.
How do you hold on to a job when you're an addict?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, because you're up for a few days at a time. Sometimes you go to sleep and you'd be asleep for 26 hours, 28 hours. Sometimes, like, I'd like, oh yeah, set my alarm to go to work tomorrow. And I'd set it for 4 a.m, and I'd wake up and it was 5:30 in the afternoon the next day.
So yeah, at what point did you realise you needed help?
I remember the exact moment. I could have kept on going, and I could have kept on being that person, but I got kicked out of the house I was in, and I was forced to stay in like a motel, like a pub motel. It was the dirtiest place ever, and I think I had $1,000 on me. I don't know where I had the $1,000 from, but I bought half an 8-ball of gear, and the plan was to sell it from the motel that I was in. And I went through my phone and I started hitting people up, and no one got back to me. And I ended up sitting there and I smoked the whole half of 8-ball in one night, which is a fair bit. Like, it's probably, when I say like a point keeps someone up for a day when they haven't smoked it, that's probably 16, 17 times that amount. I remember when I was walking down the main road, it was 8 o'clock in the morning and everyone was going to work. People get coffees from the servo, and like, I'm there just coming down hard off the drug and tried to call everyone in your phone. Not one person answered you. I think the fun's over.
What did you do to break the habit? Did you rely on like rehab, family?
From that morning of walking home, like, something just changed in my mind where I hated who I became.
What would you say to other struggling addicts?
The only advice I could give them is just to start trying to hang around positive people. Like, positive people is pretty much the only thing that's going to get you out of it. I was lucky I had a couple of friends that were keeping tabs on me, invited me to barbecues, take your phone, throw it away. One thing that helped heaps for me was going to the gym. It's not about growing muscles, it's not about anything like that. It's about growing your mind, becoming stronger in the mind. It's going to be slow and it's going to be shit every now and then, and you just got to be happy with making a little bit of progress every week or every month or whatever. And yeah, hopefully one day, like, I'll get all the cars back and I'll get that awesome job again, you know.
Wavelength.
You are listening to Wavelength, and we just sat down with a addict of methamphetamines who has since, as he just explained, cleaned himself up and turned his life around. Speaking about Adelaide's meth problem, that is the thread of tonight's show, is how do we solve Adelaide's meth problem? We've been named, according to new research, the meth capital of the world.
Which is quite chilling.
It's not great.
No.
It's not great, but he said in that story earlier, everyone knows someone who can get it. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think everyone knows someone who has used it. If you're living here in Adelaide and you have a decent network here in Adelaide, if you don't think you know anyone who has been involved with that drug, it's quite likely that someone may actually be lying to you and hiding something from you.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing.
Not to make blanket assumptions, but it is chilling how it kind of just pervades everything.
It's extremely common, and I'm sure there's plenty of stories in Adelaide of like that man's that we just heard, and which is upsetting. It doesn't, like, South Australia doesn't seem like a place where it would become popular, but there's probably a lot of causes as to why drugs like that get so popular in a place like Adelaide as well.
And once it becomes so widespread and there's just always people who have it, and then that sucks other people in, and it's just this thing that spirals out of control.
Wavelength.
Tonight we're having a pretty serious conversation about the meth issue that we have in Adelaide. We've been named the meth capital of the world. Addiction and problems associated with that are really, really rife here, and it's something that we clearly need to do more or do things differently to try and curb.
Yeah, before we heard from a former addict of meth who was telling us his story about how he overcame his addiction and is on a better path now, but talked about the struggles he went through. He lost his job, he lost a lot of things, and it definitely changed his life quite a bit.
Yeah, and also just how it can be a bit of a slippery slope, which I think is how a lot of people do get into these positions. It starts at a party and, yeah, I might just experiment with this one thing, and then suddenly it's happening again and again, and all the people around you are doing it. And then suddenly it snowballs into such a huge problem. I've seen it happen to people that I know as well. We got another text, and at this point I am just so upset that the phones aren't working, because I would love to actually talk to this person. But they have shared their story with us over text message, saying, I believe the government needs to step in and provide more resources for safe drug testing and education. I know growing up, I was always curious about drugs, even though my family was very strict. I found myself stripping and spending $1,500 a week on an addiction when I struggled to afford the drug I was using. I was buying other ones. I overdosed on it, and I was in a very bad way. I lost my home. I've had to sell my car. I'm getting my life back on track now, but there needs to be more done.
What a story. Thank you so much for sending that in.
First of all, yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. I'm very appreciative of how brave that is to share something like that with people who are on the radio.
Yeah.
And to then share that to all of the people in Adelaide who are listening.
But I think that they're right. The government probably does need to step in. I mean, if we're being named the meth capital of the whole world, like, if that isn't a red flag, then what is?
And I'm not sure if it's even clear to people where they can turn if they are concerned that their use might be getting out of control.
Yeah.
I think if you have someone in your life who you are concerned is maybe abusing a substance, like, where do you start? What do you do? There's no clear answer that instantly springs to mind. There are resources out there, absolutely. That's not to diminish any of it, but I think those resources need to be easier to access. They need to be better, publicized.
Yeah. Well, I think what earlier in the piece when we were talking to that former addict, he was saying that you need to surround yourself with positive people. So I think maybe there's also something on us as people. If you know somebody who's going through it, if you suspect them of being addicted to something like meth, a lot of the time they're really good at hiding it too. So that's the other thing. But if you do suspect something, please, like, if you think it's safe, maybe it's a good idea to try and involve yourself in their life and not be a hero or anything, but just be there for that person.
Yeah, the person that we interviewed in part one of the story said, positive people helped him get out of the hole that he was in. Positive people who just reached out to him and invited him to barbecues and invited him to activities where that kind of stuff wasn't present. And, if you can show someone in your life a way of living that doesn't revolve around a substance, it can do wonders. I think one last note as well, just on this before we move on and go to a song and then get into part two. We actually had someone from the Sammy D Foundation in with Loz and Tomo last week.
Right.
And they were talking about schoolies, which ran over the weekend. And one of the points that they really drove home was that, obviously this is talking about schoolies in a slightly different situation, but one of the things that they really try to bring home is that medical staff are there to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you can get concerned that substances are illegal and you don't want to get busted by the police because there are consequences for that.
Yeah.
But in terms of reaching out to a doctor, to a hospital, don't ever be afraid to do that.
No, because I think ambulance people always say this. They're not there to arrest you. They're not there to tell you off. They're not there to put you in jail. They're there to help you.
Yeah, their job is to make you healthy and to solve any medical issues that may be happening.
Wavelength.
Tonight we're asking how to solve Adelaide's meth problem. Earlier we heard from an addict about how easy it can be to access and how slippery the slope into addiction can be. For part 2 of our story, we sat down with some medical professionals, including someone who sees addicts come through the emergency department on a regular basis.
Wavelength.
To understand the effects of ice on a wider community, we spoke to 2 experts in the field on just how detrimental these drugs are. The first, Professor Jason White, who is the head of the School of Pharmacy and Medical Science at the University of South Australia. His research deals heavily in the area of drugs and alcohol dependence as well as treatment options.
Methamphetamine is a stimulant drug. It produces a range of effects on people, but it does have some negative effects as well. The drug also has the potential to produce psychotic effects such as paranoia and hallucinations and delusions.
How did Adelaide become the meth capital? When did we see this rise in numbers of people taking methamphetamine?
Australians, on average, have relatively high disposable income, and it is cheap in the sense of as a recreational activity or something that people would spend their money on.
Would you say the government is doing enough to tackle this issue?
There is certainly a lot of effort on the part of government to deal with the methamphetamine issue. It is something for which there is a very strong response, and it's a very significant concern of government. Certainly people can access treatment. They can access public treatment through Drug and Alcohol Services South Australia, so they can phone initially, they can make outpatient appointments. I would say one other thing that it should be recognised in South Australia, while the rate of use in Adelaide has been quite high, in rural South Australia or regional South Australia, it's less than the average in regional Australia.
We also spoke to Dr. Winfield, who works at the heart of Adelaide at the RA, and who sees in first hand the methamphetamine crisis in the city. Would you agree that Adelaide's got a meth problem?
Yes, I would. We see people admitted to hospital 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We cover all manner of situations, from the standard person helping to boost their Saturday night party nights out, through to the so-called high-functioning person who just needs that extra kick to get them up at 8 a.m. in the morning. At any time, meth seems to tip people over the edge. They become a little bit too sleep deprived, and suddenly it's a massive problem. We get the police involved. The ambulance needs to bring them to hospital.
Do you think meth patients are taking up beds and causing an overcrowding issue?
Now, this is a very complicated question. Overcrowding is a multifaceted problem that is very difficult to answer neatly. What's also difficult is that people who are intoxicated with methamphetamine are psychotic a lot of the time. That is a true mental health concern that essentially means that for their safety and the safety of others, that they need to remain in hospital. So there is some medical indication to keep them in hospital. Now, you could argue, of course, that it's a preventable problem, but it's, again, complicated that there are people who take methamphetamine to escape the world, to address other mental health concerns. They use it to treat themselves for their mental health, as well as those who take it purely recreationally.
Wavelength.
That was Adrian and Kelly catching up with a couple of medical professionals, one of whom works in an emergency department directly, and another one who is more so on the research side of things, about Adelaide's meth problem. We've been named the meth capital of the world, according to new research. And we're talking about how we can possibly curb it. That last point about how, some people will use drugs like meth to escape the world. and deal with mental health problems. That kind of echoes the addict who we interviewed in part one of the story. He said that, it does often come down to mental health as well, in his opinion. And we just got a text as well from a number ending in 843 saying, I think an important issue that needs to be raised is the fact that not all people are turning to this drug in a recreational sense, but more because they can't keep up with life and its overwhelming pressures, which is an important thing to consider as well.
Yeah, which really just sort of comes back to the fact that perhaps mental health in Australia is just not looked after properly by the government. Like, maybe...
I think it's definitely connected.
Yeah. And if people are turning towards, drugs, you probably shouldn't self-medicate in the first place. Like anything. Like if you, like people can get into really bad trouble with alcohol even. Like,
yeah.
Like that's just another drug. It's just another drug like meth. Like if you turn to these drugs and you try and self-medicate and you just rely on them to get through the day, it's not gonna help you in the long term.
No, you might not even realize that that's why you're doing it, though. That's the
exactly
thing. And I think if there's one thing that we can all do right now, it's to pay attention to our friends, and if we notice someone around us is struggling, we maybe know or suspect that they might be abusing substances, maybe to deal with problems, reach out to them and just help show them a way of living that doesn't involve that, just reaching out and just having a really nice dinner, a barbecue. Like that's what the person from the first part of the story was saying as well, is that part of the reason he's been able to start to climb out of this hole is because there were certain positive people who still kept an eye on him, still invited him around for barbecues, and just those little gestures can go a long way, I think.
And also encourage your friends, if you're close enough with them, to reach out to professional mental health services, because they are extremely important. Therapists are there to help you. They're not there to tear you down. They're not there to make you feel terrible about yourself. They're there to try and get you through whatever you're going through. And there are resources for you. So I don't know if anyone's listening that is struggling, I absolutely would recommend that.
Look into drug and alcohol services, they say, as was mentioned in the story just then. Reach out to your GP. I think having a good GP who you trust, who gets you, can solve so many other problems as well. But certainly in cases like this, if you can be honest with the person who's the first point of call regarding your health, it just opens up so many doors that can be used to help you with whatever you're suffering with.
Wavelength.
You are listening to Fresh 92.7, you are listening to Wavelength, and you are listening to two people, Zane and David, who didn't look at the time and have to get through this next story before the come-up starts.
The phrase "okay boomer" has spread like wildfire, and it's safe to say a lot of baby boomers aren't happy about it. We hit the streets to see what you think of "okay boomer."
Wavelength.
Okay boomer.
It's the phrase and meme gaining viral attention used to dismiss the older generation. It's even been used in Parliament in New Zealand.
The average age of this 52nd Parliament is 49 years old. Okay, boomer.
We took to the street to see what you thought of it, and if you're using it.
I've never heard it a day in my life. What is it? Wouldn't it be just like, oh, okay, Dad? Like, it's funny, right?
There's a lot of cases where millennials and even younger generations' opinions are being written off. So I think this is just a way where we can kind of hit back.
I feel like for a very long time now, a lot of baby boomers have taken the term millennial and they've turned it into something that's a little derogatory or a little bit negative towards us. And I feel like this is our chance to kind of take that power back and kind of turn it on them instead.
It's just become so exhausting talking and arguing with boomers about issues. They just ignore and misunderstand, and they can just condescend us. We're over it. I'm over it.
First of all, I think it's great. We just need to get the boomers into check. It's cool. I think let the millennials vent. It's okay. It's our chance to be passive-aggressive to our elders.
Wavelength.
Bridget hitting the streets to ask what you think of OK Boomer, which I kind of think I agree. Like, it's a lot of people who are older, who are in that boomer demographic, are getting really worked up about it.
I know.
Like, oh, how dare you dismiss me and everything I've done.
This is like after literally years of them being on social media, be like lazy millennials. Like
I know, bloody millennials and their social media and
their tablet phone.
Spending all their money on avocado.
But I honestly believe...
And that's my problem if I want to spend all my money on avocado toast. Not all millennials are doing that.
No.
Just lots of
avocado toast is really good. But I also think that boomer is a mentality and it's not an age.
I do agree, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I fully agree. My grandparents are super chill.
Yeah. And some boomers are amazing. So I wouldn't say okay boomer to them.
Yeah, it's just, in the same way that all millennials aren't, necessarily the stereotypes that get thrust upon us. It's just a thing. It's just shut up.
It's fun. It's definitely not the N-word of ageism.
It's fun. it's definitely not. It's fun. It's venting. And, if you don't like being referred to in a dismissive way, then don't refer to others in a dismissive way.
Bam.
On that note, let's wrap the show up because the come up is about to start. Thank you so much for everyone who took part. We've got 2 shows left of the year and then we're off until 2020. Make sure you subscribe to the Wavelength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere else that you get your podcasts. You'll be the first to know when tonight's episode goes online. See ya.
Wavelength.
Love this podcast? Support it and sponsor today. Simply head to AuscastNetwork.com for details.